Jeff, you will have a hot mic if you need to speak. Good evening, and welcome to the council meeting of January 29th, 2024. The meeting is being live streamed on the Town of Kentville YouTube channel, and the most up-to-date meeting package is on the Town of Kentville website. It gives me great pleasure to welcome CAO Jeff Lawrence to the floor, and we're looking forward to ongoing work. This meeting is called to order. Have all of the councillors received and reviewed their meeting packages? Does any member of council have information pertaining to a matter before this council that has not been publicly circulated? I will remind members of council that we are in decision-making mode and we should be mindful of our decision-making wheel. We have committed to making balanced and respectful decisions and adhering to our code of conduct. We will be voting by electronic means on all votes except administrative. Are there any conflict of interest issues we should be aware of before the meeting commences? I have received regrets from Councillor Gerard, and we do have quorum for this meeting. We have been provided with a proposed agenda. CAO, are there any changes to that agenda?
No, there are not.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further changes? If we could have a motion to adopt the agenda as distributed. Councillor Huntley, thank you. Second. Deputy Mayor, thank you. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Now we have several sets of minutes to go through here. So our first set of minutes is with regards to the meeting of November 27th, 2023, and they have been distributed for your review. Are there any changes to those minutes? No, then they are approved as distributed. Thank you very much. Our next set of minutes is December the 6th council meeting, and if there are no changes, they are approved as distributed. Our next set of minutes are December the 11th, and if there are no changes, they are approved as distributed. The next set is December 21st. There are no changes. They're approved as distributed. We had a busy December. The next set of minutes are the minutes of January the 8th, 2024, special council meeting. If there are no changes, the minutes are approved as distributed. All right, and our last set of minutes is for the meeting of January 22nd. Again, that was a special meeting, and they have been distributed for your review. If there are no changes, the minutes are approved as distributed. No changes? Sweet. All right, moving right along. We have no business arising. So we'll move right along to our recommendations and reports, and the recommendations arising from CAC meetings in both December 11th and January 8th will be presented by Councillor Huntley, and Councillor Huntley will move each of the recommendations coming forward. Councillor Huntley, the floor is yours.
Thank you. At the December 11th, 2023 meeting of Council Advisory Committee, Director Wanda Matthews presented the two borrowing resolutions which require a guarantee from municipal partners in the amounts of $17,800 and $57,125, which are the town's shares. CAC Committee recommends that Council approve the attached temporary borrowing resolution in the amount of $174,000. The town of Kentville 10.23% share is $17,800 of the Valley Regional Solid Waste Resource Management Authority Partnership. I so move.
Thank you. A seconder, please. Deputy Mayor, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve the temporary borrowing resolution in the amount of $174,000. The town of Kentville's 10.23% share is $17,800 of the Valley Region Solid Waste Resource Management Authority Partnership. Is there any discussion on this matter? Are you ready for the question? The question is that council approve the temporary borrowing resolution in the amount of $174,000. The town of Kentville's 10.23% share is $17,800 of the Valley Region Solid Waste Resource Management Authority Partnership. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much.
At the December 11th, 2023 meeting of Council Advisory Committee, Director Wanda Matthews presented the two borrowing resolutions which require a guarantee from municipal partners in the amounts of $17,800 and $57,125, which are the town's shares. CAC Committee recommends that Council approve the attached temporary borrowing resolution in the amount of $553,000. The town of Kentville's 10.33% share is $57,125 of the Valley Regional Solid Waste Resource Management Authority Partnership. I so move.
Second? Second. Councillor Maxwell, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve the temporary borrowing resolution in the amount of $553,000. The town of Kentville's 10.33% share is $57,125 of the Valley Region Solid Waste Resource Management Authority Partnership. Is there any discussion on this matter? Are you ready for the question? The question is that council approve the temporary borrowing resolution in the amount of $553,000. The town of Kentville 10.33% share is $57,125 of the Valley Region Solid Waste Resource Management Authority Partnership. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much.
At the December 11th, 2023 meeting of CAC, the CAO Bedingfield reviewed the existing policy guiding correspondence submitted to council and added best practices that will be followed until the council meeting policy is reviewed in its entirety. The mayor will share all emails and letters sent to mayor and council at kentville.ca with the deputy clerk to add them to the meeting package. Correspondence must be addressed to all of council and not just the mayor or a single councillor. So Council Advisory Committee recommends that council adopt these correspondence best practices with amendments discussed. I so move.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Maxwell, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council adopt correspondence best practices as presented. Is there any discussion on this matter? Councillor York.
Thank you. Through the chair to the CAO, is there, and perhaps actually to the chair as well, when can we expect to be reviewing policy G70 in its entirety?
It's his first day.
I tell you.
So I haven't given any thought to that at this point in time. Today is my first day, and my priority was to prepare for items that were on the agenda. Correspondence has been an ongoing issue between town council, and the best practice was a bridge. I did talk to the mayor about working with council to set some procedures in place so that everybody is clear as to how things are going to be vetted.
Okay.
But a major review is probably a couple of months away at least.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I just wanted to make a comment around that, and I was sort of going back to the minutes of the last meeting where we talked about correspondence and how it would be treated. So one of the things that I was looking at or thinking about was that in the meantime, before G70 is fully reviewed and we look at correspondence as it pertains to that, as it pertains to G70, I'm wondering if when the correspondence is sent in, and I think what we talked about is that the deputy clerk would vet it, to ensure that, if it didn't include offensive, derogatory, defamatory language, so to speak, that it would be presented on the agenda. But further to that, if it is on the agenda, I think also what we talked about was that if a counselor wanted to speak to the such letter, that it would have to be the consensus of council that happen. And I'm just wondering is, once something is listed as correspondence on the agenda, if we could just do it by way of, if any one of the counselors wanted to, say, pull that piece of correspondence and speak to it. And obviously speaking to it, if it's contravening any sort of FOIPOP violations or bylaws or what have you, then that would have to be pulled back. But I just wonder if that's something that could be put forward for consideration. Thank you.
CAO, did you want to take that?
So I wasn't here for the discussion at the December CAC, so I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. If there's a piece of correspondence that's on the agenda that a counselor wants to speak to, that they could speak to that?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yes, so if there's, let's say, for example, there's 10 pieces of correspondence, they'd be listed 1 to 10. The title and who the author was of the correspondence, and if, say, Councillor Huntley wanted it pulled, she would simply say, can you pull that? And then when it comes around to that piece of correspondence, if they wanted to speak to it or make a comment around it, then they could.
So this is my understanding, and it means I stand corrected if I'm not understanding the intent of the meeting. I think what was requested was that for a letter to be read fully into the record, it would require a majority vote of council. But if a councillor wanted to speak to anything that was included in the correspondence, they could absolutely speak to that topic. But I could stand corrected if I'm off base.
Okay, that's great.
That's good.
Thank you.
Councillor Zabia.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. For this year, I've struggled with this for, oh my goodness, maybe 2-3 years now, because we do have policy G64, which in there it says correspondence is to be added to the agenda. So this is worded nicely. I'm still not really understanding why we've got this prepared when we already have a policy that we really haven't followed for the last 3 years at all, and it's been kind of dicey what goes on the agenda. Much like tonight, I think there's a piece from the library there which has been added, and that's great, but other pieces obviously weren't. And that in itself has always been a question to me. So, I mean, this is worded great. I think the process is great, but we did have a policy, G64. So I still don't understand why we didn't follow that or why it's been kind of neglected. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. It's my understanding that G64, this was just in addition to G64 to try and tighten up things, and that's the way that I took it, that's what is to be done. I'd just like a clarification that the printed correspondence will be included on the agenda, that the public gets a chance to read those letters. We're not going to read them all. We're not going to read them, but that they would be included. And I think that was the intent, that we would do that. And yes, and I'm glad that we're even if one person wants to speak to a correspondence, one counselor wants to speak to it, I think that's very important, because otherwise it looks like censorship. So I think that it's important to do that. So just want to make clear that the printed correspondence will be there. Thank you.
So the framework that I would envision would be correspondence would come in, it would go to the deputy clerk. The deputy clerk would review it and make sure it isn't offensive. If it's found to be offensive, she would bring it to my attention. I would give direction to contact the individual and ask them to resubmit the correspondence and be very specific on the sections that we felt were offensive. The other piece is correspondence that comes in that deal with legal issues. That should go to in camera. It should never show up on, again, just trying to provide clarity to everybody so they understand. And even, I can't speak to what happened over the last 3 years. I'm trying to set something in place going forward. And the genesis of this started before my time in December. But it would be to include the correspondence, on the agenda packet, as long as it wasn't offensive. If it was offensive, to communicate back to the individual that if they resubmit it and made it not offensive, we would put it on the agenda, and also even to follow up with correspondence where it touches on legal issues, where it shouldn't be discussed in open council, because anything that a councillor says could then be used in a potential lawsuit against the town, but it could be put forward for in-camera discussions. And yes, every piece of correspondence wouldn't be read, but it would be included in the packet, aside from that subset. And any councillor can speak to any particular piece of correspondence, and if somebody wants a piece of correspondence read into the record, that would require the majority of council to support it being read into record. That's the best I could come up with without having been in those meetings. And I support that direction. If you're asking, does the CAO support the direction that was decided in December?
That's good.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the CAO and I had several points of contact today with regards to this, and one of the things that I brought up was with regards to email that's coming to the mayor and council. If this is going to go on the agenda, we can't have everybody responding to it. So any correspondence that comes to council and mayor, I should be the only one who responds to it by thanking the sender, and then there's one of three options. Their correspondence will be added to the agenda as correspondence. It will be sent to the CAO for operational review. So let's say we receive an email that says there's a big sinking hole in front of my house. Well, we don't want to wait till next council meeting to deal with that, so that goes over to the CAO. However, as the CAO explained, is that even though it's an operational matter and he takes direction on that and gets it done, the email will still go on our list as an operational matter that's been dealt with. So as a member of council, you will see that in the correspondence file that we have set up. And then the other option will be that email that's or wording or tone that is sketchy will be sent to the clerk through the CAO for suitability before it goes. So it'll be one of three choices. So again, the request would be that you do not respond to emails that come in this manner. Your opportunity to respond to those will be here in the chamber, and everyone will know what is going on. The other thing that we had the opportunity to talk about was to have an email address called Correspondence. So if somebody wanted to provide correspondence for the agenda, then rather sending it to council and mayor, they send it to this correspondence email, which would go to the deputy clerk, and then it would be dealt with in that manner, and everything will end up on the agenda. So that's kind of, I'll say, a rough process, but the CAO and staff have more details that need to go in this. And we will see it on our SharePoint site. So I don't know how we're setting it up at this point, but we will always have access to that email or to that correspondence. I shouldn't just call it email, but to that correspondence on our SharePoint site. Is there anything further? Are you ready for the question? If I can find my place here. The question is that council adopt the correspondence best practices as, and we're saying as presented, but the CAO will be kind of beefing these up a bit more for our use. So voting is now open. So the question is that council adopt the correspondence best practices as presented. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much.
At the December 11, 2023 meeting of Council Advisory Committee, CAO Beddingfield outlined the grant application that will see residents learn more and implement natural stormwater management practices over a 2-year period. Council Advisory Committee recommends that Council approve the Sustainable Communities Challenge Grant application in support of a 2-year project, Climate Resilience Initiative, Natural Stormwater Management, and further that Council support the cost of the project at $156,450, with $124,000 coming from the SCC grant. I so move.
Thank you. A seconder? Councillor York, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that Council approve the Sustainable Communities Challenge Grant application in support of the 2-year project Climate Resilience Initiative, Natural Stormwater Management, and further that Council support the cost of the project at $156,450, with $124,000 coming from the SCC grant. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to approve the Sustainable Communities Challenge Grant application in support of a 2-year project, Climate Resilience Initiative, Natural Stormwater Management, and further that Council support the cost of the project at $156,450, with $124,000 coming from the SCC grant. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much.
At the September 11th, 2023 meeting of Council Advisory Committee, staff working with the Planning Department presented some minor amendment suggestions for the MPS regarding engagement with adjacent municipalities and wording in the MPS and the public participation policy. Council Advisory Committee recommends that Council give first reading to the amendments of the municipal planning strategy and further schedule a public hearing prior to second reading on February 26, 2024. I so move.
Thank you. Second. Councillor York, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that Council approve first reading of the MPS amendments and further schedule a public hearing prior to second reading on February 26th. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is that Council approve first reading of the MPS amendments and further schedule a public hearing prior to second reading on February 26th. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried.
At the January 8th, 2024 meeting of Council Advisory Committee, Mayor Sandra Snow outlined the need for more coordinated support for climate and sustainability initiatives in the town, and how a grant through the Community Climate Capacity Program would provide a climate staff person for the town over 3 years. Council Advisory Committee recommends that Council support the Community Climate Capacity Grant application. I so move.
Seconder. Councillor York, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that Council support the Climate Community Capacity Grant application. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is that Council support the Climate Community Capacity Grant application. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you. All right, our next business is our councillor reports. Councillor reports are presented monthly by each member of council, detailing their committee and community work in support of the town of Kentville. Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. The last council was November 27th. Last CAC was January the 8th. January 26th, attended the Police Commission, which I'm sure the chair, Councillor York, will give a fulsome report. January 22nd, a special council meeting on the rezoning. January 18th, Joint Fire Services. Primarily, we talked budgets, a few truck updates. And stuff like that. December 6th, CAO Selection Committee. December 7th, joint fire again. It sounds like I'm sort of sloughing these off. Primarily, the last two joint fire have been about budget talks, and we won't get into deliberations about fire budget talks until we get here, so in our budget talk. So that is my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Huntley.
Thank you. Same dates as Councillor Gerard. With the town of Kentville, I attended the Water Commission, Source Water Protection, the Regional Emergency Management Organization meetings, Valley Regional Enterprise Network back in November. Accessibility and inclusion. I had the luxury of sitting in on the town's accessibility and inclusion meeting, and some of the things that we are doing provincially with the Accessibility Committee really flows well with what we're doing here in the town, so that was really good to see. We're all on the same page. Municipal Autonomy Committee and Board of Directors with Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities. And again, under our Accessibility Steering Committee, I'm taking part in the Accessibility Foundations training, so it's a train the trainer course. So I would be able to talk about the provincial trainings in not just this town, but if anybody needs it close by. The other thing is there's been an invite from the AMAN's Accessibility Steering Committee. They're going to do a road show, so I'm hoping that they will show up here to attend to the meeting here in March. And under the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, under Partners for Climate Change, the big discussion is the National Building Code standards and suggestions for standard changes. And as we know, that topic is going to be held more than once. And there was a Board of Directors meeting and orientation. And there are other meetings, Climate Caucus, Brain Injury Nova Scotia, Kentville Rotary. We had selection committee meetings regarding CAO and interim CAO. I took part in the Kentville events for celebration of the new Deputy Chief of Police, Kentville Police Brunch, Anglican Church Breakfast, Street Renaming and Reconciliation Ceremony. That was absolutely wonderful to attend. Thank you to everybody who participated. Under miscellaneous events, I have a variety of meetings there. One of the ones that I was invited to was the bird team meeting at the town of Kentville, which I've never sat in before and never thought I actually liked nature that much. But what I learned was incredible, and I look forward to attending a lot more meetings. And I would like to thank the deputy clerk for sending me that invite, so thank you. Moving on, I did add in my correspondence that I had received, and I did not put in anybody's names because I forgot to ask if that was okay. So I just put in the topics. I had the bike lane hazard bylaw complaint. I had 4 emails on that one. Eves Hollow cleanup, School Street, 2 emails, acknowledgement of the drop-off material by a resident, facility use in town, pallet housing project, culvert issue, Robinson property, FOIPOP Act, Audit Committee and Management Letter, Drainage Area and Leaves, Pallet Community, 4 emails, Crosswalk Button Broke, Stop Sign Icy on Grant Street, Miners Marsh Sanding, Unkempt Property, Press Release Against Homelessness, Robinson Property, and the feces on a sidewalk. Right now, and I've attached copies of most of the meetings, and that is my report.
All right, thank you. Councillor Zabian.
Thanks, Mayor Snow. Through the chair, if I may. Just wondering, Councillor Huntley, I see here you were in Ottawa, I guess, for FCM in November. Yes. Just what was the takeaway from that you brought back to Kentville? Just a little update on that, if you could. Thank you.
Absolutely. And, sorry.
You're on.
Thank you. And I did attach that report in here, and when I came back, I gave all the councillors the pamphlet of all the things that we talked about. And the biggest piece that is happening right now, it talks about a municipal growth framework. What that means is, what they're saying is, everybody wanted to go to the table and meet with the federal MPs to talk about towns right now, municipalities cannot afford anymore. We need help with infrastructure in building and forwarding our town. So that was kind of the plea of you got to share your story about where you lived and what was happening. That was a huge takeaway. The other piece was big talks on climate change. And I know every municipality talks about it, but when you're sitting around that table and you're listening to all the other stories, you realize it's way bigger than what you've brought to the table. So there's a lot of learnings there. And third one was a huge discussion on housing. And I know it's a housing issue everywhere. But one of the things is we are always talking about housing, but the biggest worry right now is trades. And trades are not filtering through fast enough. So it was about coming together with ideas about what to do, how fast we can do it, and in the piece that's attached to the meeting, it also gives a little piece about, Sean Fraser, housing. And he had talked about ways of, trying to be faster than your counterparts and think about ideas outside the box. So it was great learnings, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I've attended all my council meetings and council advisory committee meetings. I may have forgotten to list one of the special council meetings, but that's okay. We had a number of them. December 6th, I had the naming committee, and we looked at a very long list of submitted names for the dog park, submitted from the community. We whittled down the list to our top 3 suggestions, and those have been submitted to staff for a deep dive on whether those would be acceptable before we bring them to council. On December 8th, I had the Inclusion and Access Committee. At that one, we named Mike Cameron as the new chair of the committee with Spencer Lang as the deputy. Draft of the audit for updating town hall has been presented to staff to look over, and as council knows, some of it has come to us. It will then come to the committee and then on to council and the CAO. We looked at the outline for the street renaming ceremony, which has already been held. We had a staff presentation on anti-discrimination and diversity, and set up a task team to look at what can be done to make minority groups feel more welcome in the town of Kentville. December 7th was a special council meeting regarding CAO selection. December 21st, special council meeting, CAO interview. January 11th, Annapolis Valley Trails Coalition. This is the first bit of bad news that I can bring to this committee on the Annapolis Valley Trails Coalition. The major topic was that the Nova Scotia government is pulling back their financial support for trails in the tune of approximately $20,000. The mandate of the Annapolis Valley Trails Coalition has been completed, and that was to build trails and hire a coordinator. The issue is that now that the trail through the valley is basically complete, the province does not have a plan for trail maintenance, which is a huge issue. As we all know, if trails are not maintained, they grow over very quickly. Bicycling tourism is growing exponentially every year, and it would be a shame to see this revenue for the province and hopefully also for municipalities dry up. So the coalition has funding right now through to March, but will need emergency funding of somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 from the coalition partners to get us through till the next budget session. An intermunicipal service agreement was suggested by the board, and I believe a meeting is being set up with CAOs and other parties to look at this situation. And I believe our CAO will be contacted for that. I think Wolfville may be taking the lead, I'm not sure. I have spoken with our recreation director concerning this. I actually spoke with him, I think it was the day of or the day after I got this information concerning this issue, and asked him to mention it to the mayor and the CAO at the time, so hopefully that was done. Now that our new CAO is here, I will ask to meet with him and the mayor to discuss prior to our meeting, our trails meeting in February. So I need to set up a meeting for that. So that's what's going on. That's the big thing that's going on with trails. And it would be a real shame to lose that trail running through the Annapolis Valley. I know that we do our own maintenance on our own trail, but if there's nothing on either side, it's a pretty short trail that I don't think will get too much use. And I was really encouraged by the coalition members to still remain a partner and to be a part of this coalition, and not to kind of say that we do our own thing, so you guys are on your own on this. So that's something that they really put it to me about that. So anyway, January 19th, Inclusion and Access Committee. The town hall update is now with the council for input. The committee approved an ad hoc belonging task team for 1 year to complete goals around diversity and inclusion for all citizens in the town. We had a presentation on accessibility in our business community and what can be done to help businesses modify to be more accessible. We looked at updating the flag flying policy to try and make it more inclusive, and that policy is now with staff, being looked at with staff. January 22nd was a special council meeting, looked at making some changes in the MPS and LUB to accommodate more housing in our town. For Kentville events, I attended the Kentville Police Service Holiday Brunch, wonderful fundraiser by our police to help with making Christmas brighter for people in our community. It's been going on for many, many years, and it's always well attended. I attended a citizen birthday celebration I was invited to for longtime Kentville resident Joan Kroll, and many of you may know Joan, and this was a special birthday for her, and her husband was used to look after eyeglasses, and so it was nice to see her again. Street naming, renaming ceremony, we were all there, I believe, a fantastic ceremony with our Indigenous community celebrating the renaming of Cornwallis Street to Bridge Street. Close to 150 people attended this event, and special thanks must go out to the organizing committee. They did an absolutely fantastic job, and I could never give enough words to explain how well that was done. I met with a citizen on January 17th to look at and listen to some issues within our town, and that's pretty well my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. So last CAC and last council, of course. January the 7th was the KBC board meeting where I sit ex officio on that Kentville business community. Just a few of the items that they covered off in that committee. Obviously, they're in good financial standing. Their year end is March 31st of this year, so they'll be doing a presentation to council shortly thereafter. They welcomed a new business here, the Bridge Beauty Bar, which is named not after Bridge Street, but we're very excited that that Cornwallis is now Bridge Street, so it worked out well for them. They talked about some changes to the facade program, and interestingly enough, they're thinking about doing a third stream of funding through facade for accessibility. So putting it out to business owners who are trying to make their properties more accessible, and maybe rather than the facade piece, that they're doing it more for the accessibility piece. So more to be heard on that. They're just under the exploration mode of that. They are going into an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the Multicultural Festival, as that is no longer a Town of Kentville event, but it will be organized quite extensively through KBC. There will be improved signage around parking and walkability in the town. That's something that they're working on as well. So January the 22nd was a special meeting of council. I think my other colleagues mentioned that about plan amendment for PID 555-1774 to be potentially called the Kentville Crossing, and they're seeking an expedited planning process to make changes to both the MPS and the LUB to allow for multi-unit development along the frontage of the aforementioned PID. January 5th was REMAC, which is the King's Regional Emergency Management Organization, which I chair. There is an agenda for that. Just a couple of items worth noting in that committee meeting. We talked about the vulnerable person registry, and I will do another plug for that. If there are any people that are vulnerable, they should be registered. And if they have friends or family that know that they are vulnerable, then they should register those citizens. Dan Stovall also talked about the VON Capable program, and I could provide anybody the information on that as well. January the 10th was Investment Advisory Committee meeting. Our investment advisory reported on the portfolio that we're just north of 13 million. And we had some discussions around how the reporting is done for the Investment Advisory Committee and discussed essentially how to condense that for the general public. There's more to come on this. The consensus from that meeting is that 2024 will be a tough market this year with the US election plus central banks having to prove something with interest rate reductions. December the 21st was an in-camera personnel council meeting. December 15th and November the 27th were 2 regional sewer committee meetings. I have one coming up this Friday as well. There were discussions mainly around the force main breaks around Eves Hollow, and I think Director Bell had spoke to those at the last CAC meeting. And then, of course, there were operations and compliance updates and additional updates around the desludging efforts. When I have my meeting this week, I will bring more information back on that to see where things stand with the desludging. Sorry, excuse me. I think we're about 75, and I'm looking at you, Mayor, around 75 to 80% on the desludging efforts right now. So more to come on that. December the 6th and the November the 28th were meetings of council and meeting around the CEO recruitment committee. Some of the events, January the 9th, of course, was the renaming celebration. And all of the Cornwallis Street signs have been replaced with the Bridge Street signs. I just made note that it was a peaceful and memorable evening, and I would like to thank Jennifer and staff who made the event what it was. It was great. There was great representation from the Indigenous communities and of their culture, and we celebrated the fact that we are all treaty people. January 22nd, I had a meeting with who was at the time our interim CAO, Louis Catino. I had a meeting January 9th with some of the folks from KBC to talk around the complement around KBC and the executive director. December 8th was a meet and greet with the Honourable Minister Lohr. December 15th was the King's Kentville Police breakfast, and December 7th, Valley Ford official grand reopening. November 22nd, I did attend the UARB hearings. I was not able to attend the rest of them, but I have listened to the recordings. They're all on the UARB website. So for folks that are interested, it takes hours and hours of time, and but it's very interesting information. So, and that is my report. Thank you.
Councillor Zabin, you have a question.
Thank you, Mayor Snow, through the chair, if I may. Deputy Mayor Savage, is there any update on that executive director position with KBC?
How so?
I understand there's going to be a vacancy. Are they looking to hire someone, or are they going to try to restructure? You don't know yet.
Oh, I do know. Yeah.
Okay.
There potentially may not be a vacancy.
Okay.
So more to come on that.
Okay.
We're hoping.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. You're very welcome.
Councillor York.
Thank you. The joy of being sort of near the end alphabetically, which my councillor colleague across the aisle understands, is that most of the dates have already been discussed. So I will hit the bits that have yet been discussed, which are mostly my committee meetings. So I had the pleasure of attending King's Point to Point for the first time. And much like the Annapolis Valley Regional Library, there will likely be a request for funding coming our way soon. It's a story that's across the province right now, which is funding models are a little bit dated based on the needs of the current environment. So there will be likely a letter received by the CAO or by council looking for an increase to funding. So expect to see that. Again, you'll see it in the correspondence from the AVRL, the Annapolis Valley Regional Library, that they're looking at changing the funding model so that they can make budget ends meet, which is always helpful. Speaking to the Board of Police Commissioners and the breakfast that my colleagues have mentioned this evening already, that breakfast raised over $4,000 for Chrysalis House. And we learned at our police commission meeting that domestic violence is one of the largest calls for service in our community, so it's always nice to see our police service give back directly to that organization, Chrysalis House, which works primarily with women and children in domestic violence situations, and for them to be the recipients of $4,000. And while I'm only interested with toast at the breakfast, it is still an honor to be able to participate with them, and making that the event such a success is entirely on the Kentville Police Service. That said, we did have our year-end review at the Board of Police Commissioners that went through the calls for service and what the police service has been doing for the past year. That presentation, while it was public here in our meeting, is going to be made more publicly available. It's going to go on the Board of Police Commissioners website as well as KPS's website, so that residents can see just exactly what's happening in town and just exactly where calls for service are and where your police members are, and where their attentions are being turned. It was an informative presentation and one that lends itself nicely to being publicly digestible, and it's stat heavy, but it's also organized such that it's easy to understand. So that will be coming this month, I believe. We had a review of our work plan from 2023. And we reviewed everything that we have accomplished this year, which is also going to be turned into an infographic and posted online so that people can see what the Board of Police Commissioners is doing year after year, and to also hold us accountable for what we say we're going to accomplish and what we do actually accomplish. So that's new coming this month. I do believe I've already talked about Kings Point to Point, so that's helpful. Diversity Kings I had the pleasure of attending as well. But I was also able to speak to the town of Kentville's renaming process and how we handled the renaming process of our streets, and then was also able to invite everybody at that committee and the public to the renaming ceremony. So those conversations are being had in a regional setting, and how best to tackle those renaming projects. So Kentville's standard is one that I was happy to share, and one that I hope is implemented in other communities in the area. Everything else I believe has been discussed. And this is the Strategic Planning Committee. So, and circling back to the Board of Police Commissioners, we're working on our strategic plan so that when new representatives are onboarded and when the community is asking, what the heck do you do? It becomes a little bit more clear, and the expectations are a little bit more clearly laid out, as well as having the accountability piece baked into the document, which will hold the Board of Police Commissioners accountable to not only the Nova Scotia Police Act, but also their internal guiding documents. So those are all things that are happening. We hope to see the the strategic plan completed by the middle of the year, so around July. But that might yet be a pipe dream. We are still hoping to achieve that end. So that's an update, I think, on all of the items that have yet to be discussed here this evening. So I will leave it at that.
Thank you. Councillor Zabel.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. So I attended all the same meetings as my peers. I'm not going to be redundant and go through all of them that you've already touched on, but November 20th, there was a Heritage meeting and Heritage Committee meeting, and you're going to see something in the agenda shortly, which kind of tails onto that. So we'll bring that up in a couple minutes. I am just going to hit two items from the Kentville Volunteer Fire Department. Chair Gerard mentioned the two meetings, and I'll just kind of highlight a couple little things here. As he said, both of these meetings were centered around the budget, and I'm just going to note that the chief and a few of the members from the department traveled to Florida in December to finalize the new truck build, and the estimate on that is about 930 days. It's quite a process. We're also going to be getting our aerial truck back, I think, next week, the first part of February. Coming back from Quebec, just undergoing some work, and another highlight from them is that their call volume in the month of December was 75. They had 75 alarms, and as a total in 2023, this department had 500 calls, which is the highest in their history. I think last year, in 2022, they had 445, so they've got a big call volume. Street renaming, I attended that, which we've highlighted on. On the 4th of December, Kathleen, I think it's Novella, I hope I'm saying that right, from Valley Bren hosted an event here at Town Hall about hiring newcomers to employ with support from the province, federally as well, and provincially. Great programs, and it was really informative. I'm glad I came to that. On the 18th of January, I had a great meeting with the interim CAO. Also, there were several conversations with a citizen regarding unsightly properties, and I think there's concerns about not receiving follow-up, but also I think we might have to, and this could come up later, that there might need to be a clearer understanding of what dangerous and unsightly means and who's going to handle those matters. I know there was some conversation around that, so that's important. My expenses for the month were $36, and my year from April until now is $328. And I just want to highlight two things. I also attended Joan Crowell's birthday party, which was great community there. And I'm going to acknowledge too the passing of longtime pharmacist in town, Bernie Hawkins, who passed away last week. So I think he had a 35-year stint in a bunch of pharmacies in town. So rest in peace, Bernie. Thank you.
Thank you. CAO, so on our agenda is typically a spot here if the CAO has any update on operational matters. And I realize today's your first day, but I didn't want to take it off of the list in case there was something that you wanted to say, perhaps.
I'm not really in a position to speak to operations. I have been down about 4 times now, and I would say that we do have an excellent staff. Fortunate to have them. I'm looking forward to the next 2 to 3 months to get fully up to speed, and so happy to be in Kentville.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. So my report is next. You've all been provided with a copy, and there is a copy on the network for those of you that don't have a copy. As you can see, lots of meetings. Meetings are meetings, and some of the fun stuff, I guess, was the lunch and learn with Immigration Services, Research Nova Scotia Child Poverty. Now this is one that I attended. So Research Nova Scotia is out of Dalhousie University, and they do these projects. And if you have the opportunity to attend one of their webinars, they start exactly at 8:30 and they end exactly at 9:15. And if you don't get all your questions in, they actually provide you with feedback afterwards. Now, this research was actually on child poverty in Nova Scotia. As you know, we have the highest child poverty in Canada. And one of the things that they were talking about is how we think, and there's been a whole group that said that poverty leads to poor decision making, that we have unconscious thinking, and then there's the second system that thinks that we have conscious thinking, and so anyway, it's very interesting. It's on the network if you get the opportunity to have a look at it. But there were 2 things that I took away from it that were so incredibly important, and I don't know that people know about these things. In Nova Scotia, we have low-income pharmacare for children, $5 per prescription. In Nova Scotia, with as much child poverty as we have, there is only a 5% uptake on this program, which is a sin. I have no idea how low-income people are not being provided with this information. However, it's as easy as typing in Nova Scotia Pharmacare and look for the child, low-income child program. It's a 1-page to fill in and to get on this program. The other one is there's such a thing as a Canada Learning Bond. And what it is the Canadian government will give students whose family income is below $48,000 a year a $2,000 learning bond. And it's very much like an RESP. And the federal government will even pay for the family to set up the RESP, because I think there's a $25 fee, so even that you don't have to pay for. And this $2,000 gets invested into this, and then it's available when the person goes to post-secondary school. And post-secondary is very, very wide under this Canada Learning Bond. So even if you go into the trades, you can still use the money. You don't necessarily have to go to university. But my point on this is that it's $2,000 of free money for your child in post-secondary, and because it's Canada, there's because it's federal, there's different income levels, but it's called the Canada Learning Bond, and this one has a 29% uptake. So when you think of these two programs, this is incredible amounts of money that are sitting there on the table, not being used. So if you know anybody who fits into this criteria, please, even if you can't remember what I've just said, tell them to call me. I will provide them with the links and the details, because I think that it's a sin that this just is not more widely known. So moving on from child poverty to Blue Monday webinar on the 12th of January. I guess the 12th of January is supposed to be the bluest day of the year. And anyway, I attended a webinar. It was excellent. Again, I've placed this webinar on our network. So if you're looking for it, please go ahead. In early December, I did a walkabout with a doctor and their family in downtown Kentville. They were looking at coming here to Valley Regional Hospital, so it was kind of nice to do that. I obviously had a cut and paste problem. I left 3 November items in there. I guess they must have been so much fun that I just wanted to repeat them. I did have breakfast with our new CAO back in December when he was here, and then the next day attended the KPS breakfast. And I have to say that Councillor York makes the best toast in the row. So it was wonderful. And on the 20th of December, I was fortunate enough to get an invite to have lunch with Public Works and engineering staff as part of Christmas. And then on the 9th of January was the reconciliation event. And 7th of December, I attended the funeral for Hormidas Fredette. He was 106 years old and had been a prisoner of war camp with the Japanese in the Pacific, and just this incredible man who, anyway, he died, and that's why we had a funeral. I guess I'll say that, and it was one of those moments where you realize that your contribution in this world is just so small. He was absolutely incredible, and he was still out and about right up until the time that he went into the hospital. So quite an amazing story if you get an opportunity to read about him. Valley Ford had their grand opening on the 7th of December. It was an incredible event and absolutely beautiful. My first turkey dinner of the season was Kentville Volunteer Fire Department. Again, they always put on a spectacular Christmas dinner, and it was absolutely lovely. 18th of December, MLA's Christmas party. On the 19th of December, I was fortunate enough to be invited to the federal funding announcement at 14 Wing Greenwood, where they are going to be getting the uninhabited aerial vehicles, and so that was one of those moments where you sit there knowing what's coming, but not realizing how much it truly affects our area. This has the potential of 50 new families to the Annapolis Valley, and as we know, when folks are coming to the valley, they're looking at the entire valley as a place to live. So that was really incredible, and just the effect of the federal funding on our regional economy. We should never second guess that because it's pretty incredible. And And then last week, I went to the Nova Scotia Fruit Growers Association AGM, 160 years of acting as a group, and it was a really nice event. Unfortunately, due to office commitments, I did miss the update on their financials, but I look forward to reading that, and that is my report. Thank you. All right, reports are done. We're moving on to our new business, and our first matter for new business is from the Heritage Committee request. And we do have a recommendation, and so I will ask Councillor Zabian to speak to that recommendation to council.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. So the Heritage Committee met on November 20th to continue discussions on a proposed heritage property bylaw for the town of Kentville. And during the discussion, members brought up a mechanism which might help identify and preserve the important properties and items. The committee requests that council direct staff to explore a mechanism within the development and building permitting process which would incorporate the review and identification of heritage elements in or on a building prior to permit approval, and a mechanism to give more time to discuss and identify potential alternatives to significant alterations or demolition to historical or potentially historical building as requested by the owner. So this is from us, the Heritage Committee, looking to pass this on to staff if we can to get some feedback. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. CAO, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Through your worship, no, administration will be happy to do the research. We're hoping that March meeting would be sufficient time to bring it back.
That's fine with us, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, CAO. So from council, we would have a motion that council direct the CAO to provide support to the Heritage Committee request as detailed in the December 11th memo to council. If someone could move that, please.
So moved.
Thank you. Councillor Zabian. And for the second? Councillor Maxwell, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council direct the CAO to provide support to the Heritage Committee request as detailed in the December 11th memo to council. Is there any further discussion on this? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. So I just made a couple of notes on that when I was reading through this, and it was talking about reviewing and identifying heritage elements prior to approval. And I had underlined sort of what would that be an example of, and would I know there probably are other heritage committees amongst municipalities and towns, and if they would already have something in place. And again, the second part was a mechanism to give more time to discuss and identify potential alternatives to significant alterations. And so again, I was thinking, what would that look like? Is that like public input? And again, would there be other towns and municipalities that might already have something in place? And maybe they do, maybe they don't, I'm not certain, but I just wanted to make a comment around that.
So
Thank you.
my understanding of the request is to see what else exists out there currently and then be able to bring that back. So we wouldn't be expected by March to create something that's completely new, but
Yeah.
just to come back and say, these are some of the models. As I understand it, it would be part of the permitting process, and it would be two-stage. One would be identification of what might be significant heritage, and two is, can you have something built in to at least examine what other options might exist to demolition or alterations. I don't think that, if I read that right, it's saying that we would look to completely eliminate the ability of property owners to. So it's more of a best practice as to
Yeah.
what already exists out there and bring that back.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Zabian, as the chair of that committee, did you have anything to add?
No, I think the CAO just hit the nail on the head there, I guess.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. No,
are you a no?
CAO covered that really, really well, so.
Okay, thank you. All right. If there's no further discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to direct the CAO to provide support to the Heritage Committee request as detailed in the December 11th memo to council. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much. All right, the next matter is with regards to an information report from the desk of the CAO with regards to Freedom of Information requests. CAO?
So interim CAO Kootenai has provided a very comprehensive review of FOIPOP. We're not looking for any recommendations from council, just wanted to make sure the council was aware of all the complexities of a FOIPOP application. Generally, there's a formal process to go through to submit an ad. There's timeframes that are set out, 30 days. The town can extend to 60 days with notification. Any extensions beyond that require FOIPOP administrators' approval. There are fees that are default, basically $5 submission fee. First 2 hours of staff time are free. Anything after that is charged at $15 an hour. The council could choose to set a policy that alters those rates. There are exclusions. If somebody can prove they don't have an ability to pay, or if it's deemed to be in the for the good of society, which would mean if there were an event at the sewage treatment plant and there was a real concern about it doing harm to people's health, then they could make application to waive the fees because of the nature. And also, I think, understanding, and this may go to why legal costs are so high in this area, all the different nuances that we have to make sure we're on board as far as we're not just giving out information, we have protection of privacy. There's any outside agencies that are listed and making sure that they have a chance to review. And there's also a number of sections in there where you wouldn't give the information out if it could do harm. So Councillor Kootenai, Interim CAO Kootenai, it's been a long day, has provided it for council's information. If there are any questions, I'll try and answer them, but it is more for your information.
All right, thank you very much, CAO. Are there any questions for the CAO on this matter?
Yes. Sorry. The table.
Councillor Gerard.
Just out of curiosity, if this, or something like this comes back again, is it possible to figure out what it actually costs? Like, I know you say there's a $5 fee and the first 2 hours of staff time, but in order to, and I know for the most part, FOIPOPs are not frivolous, but it would be nice if someone came in with a very specific pinpoint, this is what I want to FOIPOP, not just everything with this word in it, because I can imagine the clerk, the IT, and legal could spend a lot of time going through this.
So the way it would work in Kentville, as I understand it, is the request will come in. The deputy clerk would calculate the time. The request could be very, very narrow in focus, or it could be, I want every email on this topic for the last 3 years. She would do an estimate. She would prepare a cost. She would let the resident know. The resident has to pay that money up front before the FOIPOP request proceeds, or they can challenge to have the fees waived under some of the conditions I mentioned before, or they can challenge to the FOIPOP administrator the amount, and we would have to justify, well, this is where we came up to the calculation. So you can't, like, there's such a wide array of what could come in for a FOIPOP request that to try and give you a specific example.
No, but what I mean is calculate, on average, this is what it costs per hour for a FOIPOP. So Jennifer's time, legal time, Jason's time.
So what we do now is we charge $15 an hour for everybody's time. Council would have to set a policy, and in it we could list the rates that we charge for each specific piece. So if it is the IT specialist, IT manager's time, it would be at a certain rate, and that might be to search your email database for keywords. Jennifer's would be either at 15, or if we had a policy, it would be at her rate. Ultimately, it would depend on the pieces that are used for each specific section. But I could see on most significant emails, you would want to do what I call an email dump, where you would have Jason come in and basically search for keywords and have that all listed out, and then you would review it. And again, If it involves external municipalities, you have to send it to them and ask them for a review. If you have to be very careful that you're not giving out personal information. It's not as simple as what you would just normally think. I put in a request and they give me the information. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it might be a question on, I don't know, last year, the budget for fire services, what was the budget for fire services? That's pretty easy. Public information, we can turn that around in short order of time. But the way we do it now is we do it default as per the legislation, $15 an hour after the first 2 hours, charged on the half hour, I believe, is how it's in there.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a couple of comments, then I had a question. I found it to be both interesting and informative. And when it talks about things like careful consideration so as not to violate these laws that are established around FOIPOP, and that we really are serving our citizens well not to respond when same contravenes these FOIPOP laws, and that it does take considerable time because of the nature of these laws, and so as not to contravene them. So I found this to be very, very, very helpful. My question was more around, are we actually charging those fees now, or do we just sometimes charge them? And then back to your point around, that would be something that would have to come from council if we wanted to make changes to the fees, I suspect.
So I'm not sure historically what has happened, but I would absolutely expect that you would treat everybody the same and you would charge them based on the formula
Yeah.
that is in the act. So
Okay.
if it's 2 hours or less, then basically it's the $5 charge. Anything
Right.
more than that, and it would be at the $15 an hour rate. But I
Okay.
couldn't speak to what has happened in the past. That will
Okay.
be the practice while I'm in the CAO chair, unless council directs otherwise.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, so there is no action on this other than to become familiar with the legislation. So our next matter is another information report with regards to deed transfer tax, and the CAO has provided a report on deed transfer tax. The council may wish to direct the staff to provide a recommendation and a draft bylaw to a future CAC meeting for discussion and recommendation. CAO, I'll hand it over to you.
Again, interim CAO Kootenai has provided an information report, and it provides, it shows the municipalities that are collecting the deed transfer tax versus those that don't. We're the only town in Nova Scotia that doesn't collect it. We're one of only 2 municipalities that don't collect it. We know going forward that we're going to face increasing challenges with updating our facilities for accessibility for others. We know that we're going to have infrastructure challenges as we deal with some of the stormwater and some of the new developments. In some ways, we're handicapped vis-a-vis 90-some% of the other municipalities by not offering the deed transfer tax. One of the ways I've always viewed deed transfer tax is it's a buy-in to the existing infrastructure that exists in your municipality, be they the recreation facilities, be they water, be they sewer. But ultimately, it's council's decision as to whether they would like administration to go beyond this information report and prepare a recommendation and potentially a draft bylaw. The deed transfer tax is taxed at 1.5%. A number of municipalities, the majority of municipalities are at 1.5%. There are others that are 1 and some that are at 0.5. Again, that would be in the bylaw and to the discretion of council. So council has the information. If they would like us to go any further, administration would be pleased to do so. If not, it's information.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, CAO. Deputy Mayor, I see your light, but how about if we put a motion on the table that council direct the CAO to provide a recommendation on deed transfer tax and a draft bylaw to CAC in March?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second? Councillor Zabian, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council direct the CAO to provide a recommendation on deed transfer tax and a draft bylaw to CAC in March. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. This might be a premature question, but I'll ask it anyway. let's say this goes through and let's say we start collecting transfer tax. Those funds, could those funds be put, being held or what have you, could they be held in the investment portfolio that we have? Like if we were holding it for a certain something, like whether it's a wellness center, but for a specific use, could those funds be added, or do they have to remain in some other type of fund?
So without stepping outside of our solicitor, I believe that those come into general revenues, and that they are not allocated specifically, but could be by council if council so chose. So you have the full range of how you wanted to allocate those funds.
Okay.
It certainly would be within the purview of council to have it dedicated to something like a wellness center or infrastructure or anything else. But there are no restrictions on what you use the funds for, as long as it's a municipal purpose.
And the use of the funds, so thank you for that, for the use of the funds, but also parking those funds while in receipt of same, right? Like putting them into I'm thinking of our perpetual fund.
You absolutely could do that.
Okay, great, thank you for that.
Councillor Maxwell.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to say that, of course, I agree with this. I brought this up in my first term, that we should look at a deed transfer tax. And it was interesting to see the amount of money that could have been accumulated since I brought it up. I think it's very, very important that we add another revenue stream other than just our commercial and residential tax as the town of Kentville grows bigger. And also with needing to upgrade our recreational facilities and hopefully a wellness center in the area. I think it would be, this is something that we really need to do. And I'd like to make that motion if that's possible.
So our motion right now is to get more, and then?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
what I mean.
Yeah, we're all good.
Yeah.
All right, so we do have a motion on the floor. If there's no further discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to direct the CAO to provide a recommendation on deed transfer tax and a draft bylaw to CAC in March. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much. And our next information report from the CAO desk is with regards to legal expenses, and the CAO has provided a report on legal expenses reported, and recommends that this, I'll hand it over to the CAO.
So certainly, I was at the CAC meeting for January, and interim CAO Coutinho asked for council's input on how they would like to see the legal expenses reported, and I believe that what he has provided is in line with what was asked for. The question is this information sufficient, and also, would council like to see something like this quarterly presented for their ongoing awareness? Once we set the template up, it was a fair amount of work to gather it all, but now that we have it set up, it's not so onerous to try and provide it. And in all likelihood, it would be provided in the format that you see in the last page. So we'll still break it down by department, but also give it by category. So.
All right, thank you, CAO. Councillor Zabian, I see your light. How about if we put a motion on the floor that council direct the CAO to implement the proposed legal expense reporting and further provide quarterly reporting of legal expenses at CAC meeting. Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor York, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council direct the CAO to implement the proposed legal expense reporting and further provide quarterly reporting of expenses at the CAC meeting. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. Thanks, CAO. This is great. I think former interim or whoever worked on this, the staff, they did a great job breaking it all down. I just have a question, and I don't want to overstep. If it was the will of council, could we get more information, say, for example, on the labor one, if we wanted that broken down, without knowing, I wouldn't want details if there was persons mentioned, but just wondering, that seems like a high number, and I'm just wondering if there was the will of council, could there be more information be provided just to kind of break it down?
So, thank you, Councillor Zabian. I would, because it is legal, I would want to run it by, I hate to say
Yeah.
legal, just to make sure how far down the umbrella.
Then
we
it
can
grows
go.
higher.
I can tell you that the subsections of the labor category are personnel matters,
Yep,
collective bargaining, HR matters, code of conduct issues, and termination. So that is the leads that go into the labor code. But if you wanted to go further, I would want to run it by legal before I
Sure,
provided
okay.
the information, and that would be direction of the collective of council. if
Okay.
they wanted it.
Is there any further discussion? Oh, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. So whether we decide to present these or have them presented to us monthly, quarterly, whatever the situation or whatever the decision is, by doing that, that doesn't infringe on how the financials are done at the end of the year according to PSAB? Or does it? Or does that change it? Or do we incorporate that into it? Or that's maybe a discussion for the audit committee?
I would see that, I couldn't answer that question tonight. I would have to follow
Yeah.
up on it. I wouldn't think it would, but I would
Okay.
hate to be incorrect. So we can follow up with an answer if council's agreeable by email to that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further discussion on this matter? Are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to direct the CAO to implement the proposed legal expense reporting and further provide quarterly reporting of legal expenses at the CAC meeting. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much. All right, the next information report we have is with regards to the Cornwallis Street sign. And again, this was a report from our CAO. CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe there was some discussion on how best to deal with the Cornwallis street sign. We do have the sign in our possession. Administration is recommending that the sign be framed with wording to the history of how we got here, the role in reconciliation, and it be loaned to the Historical Society. There would be other options if council so desire, but the recommendation at this point from administration is to loan it to the Historical Society in the format as described in the report.
All right, thank you very much, CAO. Based on that recommendation, we'll put a motion on the floor for discussion that council direct the CAO to prepare the Cornwallis Street sign for loan to the Kentville Historical Society as discussed. Councillor Zabian, thank you. For the second? Councillor Maxwell, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council direct the CAO to prepare, not personally, the Cornwallis Street sign for loan to the Kentville Historical Society as discussed. Is there any discussion on this matter? Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I'm glad that we have the sign and we're going to loan it. I prefer to gift it. That's just a preference from me. I don't see any place set aside in Town Hall or Public Works where if that sign comes back, it's going to be protected and looked after. We don't have any place to store a sign as far as I know. And I know that we've had lots of things brought here, but they've disappeared. So that's my concern. I think even with a gift, if the Kentville Historical Society decided to shut down, that they give everything back to the original person that gifted to them. But, you know, I'm sure they'll accept a loan, but I would certainly like to see something put in place for if that sign comes back, and where are we going to start archiving historical remnants within the town? That would be my question. Where are we going to start to store that type of stuff? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor York?
Thank you. It would, I mean, the intent of renaming the street from the Inclusion and Access Committee was that it put to bed sort of a history that is horrendous. But if it's the will of council to memorialize it in some fashion, I'm okay with that. However, I would prefer if when the written representation is created, that it also be vetted by members who were members from rather the First Nations community who were involved in the renaming process, to make sure that the language is still reflective of their community's needs and wants, as well as the overall intent of the diversity or the Inclusion and Access Committee.
Thank you. CAO, that, I guess, extra criteria can be met?
So administration does not have a concern with that. It would be an amendment to the motion if you wanted it formalized, but the critical point here is that the name Cornwallis has, throughout history, had certain connotations to it, and it's important that the sign be passed on in a way that's reflective of the direction the council has taken in renaming to Bridge Street. So to have First Nations review of the wording, I think would make some sense.
Have you captured that have you captured those words in the minutes? No, I have not. Okay. So the motion is as discussed. So if we put those two criteria into the minutes, then we don't have to amend the motion to include them, but it becomes part of the working paper. All right. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Councillor Huntley.
Thank you. I just wanted to add on to Councillor York's comment, because we have taken how many years to decide to change the street, and I wanted to make sure that all parties who were involved in that renaming are involved now with the sign, just to be respectful. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there any further discussion on this matter? Are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to direct the CAO to prepare the Cornwallis Street sign for loan to the Kentville Historical Society as discussed. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much. All right, the next matter of business is with regards to the intermunicipal service agreement, King's Transit budget for fiscal year 24-25. And it is a recommendation from the IMSA, so the Intermunicipal Service Agreement Board of Directors is to approve the municipal operating grants and King's Transit fiscal 24-25 budgets. So you have the details as provided from the IMSA Board of Directors, and the motion is that council approve the attached King's Transit fiscal year 2024-25 operational budget in the amount of $3,836,948, and further that council approve the fiscal 24-25 capital budget in the amount of $5,630,000, and further that council approve the municipal operating grant in the amount of $1,729,103, and the town of Kentville's 20% share of this overall budget is $345,821. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And second? Councillor Huntley, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve the attached King's Transit fiscal 24-25 operational budget in the amount of $3,836,948, and further that council approve the 24-25 capital budget in the amount of $5,630,000, and further that council approve the municipal operating grant in the amount of $1,729,103. The town of Kentville's 20% share is $345,821. Is there any discussion on this matter? So council go ahead, Councillor Gerard.
I'm just curious, and I've been asking, I think, for 5 or 6 years. Can the town, or what would it cost to do an independent study on the benefits of King's Transit to the town of Kentville? I hate the funding model that we go by population, especially when this item isn't a population item, it's a mileage or square footage item where you know, I think it's an awful lot of money to see big full-size transit buses driving around with 4 people on them. They've never been able to give us ridership on where the folks that are on the bus live. And I know I probably won't get anywheres with this at all, but I just think it's time for all of these intermunicipal service agreements to see if, you know, spend the money on studies to find out if we're spending money wisely, being a member, and if we're okay with the funding models that they've come up with. Thank you.
All right, so, Councillor, I will respond to your query as a member of the IMSA Board of Directors. So, as you know, 2 years ago, Kings, West Hants, and all the way down to Annapolis County, we made the decision to, as a collective, look at all of our intermunicipal service agreements. And as you say, many were not happy with the results of what's going on. So transit, I'm going to say, is a beast all on its own. And as you see from those numbers, you know, our contribution isn't paying for the whole amount. So there's a lot of provincial money and federal money that goes into transit to keep it going. And right now, we don't even have to put any money in on the capital side because we have an $11 million grant over 3 years from the federal governments to electrify our fleet. So right now, a study is being done on how do we provide transit in the best possible way. Because if we were to look at how we're providing transit today, for every rider on that bus, it's costing us $12.40, or the value is $12.40 for that one ride, regardless of what they've paid to get on the bus. So the study is happening. However, it's not happening by, you know, the town of Kentville. It is happening by the service area of King's Transit. So we expect to see something before I'll say the year's end. You know, things are coming together. They've done consultation, public consultation. So we are expecting more information. At the end of the day, transit is not one of those things that you get rich on, or that I'm going to say you even break even on. And unfortunately, that is you know, one of those things. So there will be more information coming. You know, it's been put together, and so that's where this funding is going.
Thank you.
All right, Councillor York.
Thank you. Through the chair, if I might, to Councillor Gerard. I agree that more information is helpful, just because having more information is never a bad thing. But I would remind everyone that as we move forward with climate mandates and with accessibility mandates, public transit is often in that Venn diagram of accessibility and climate. So we need to be able to be sitting at these tables and have these tough conversations. Absolutely, we should figure out why it's costing us $12.40. However, as a means of accessibility within our community and as a means to hopefully combating some climate action items, then I think transit needs to be perhaps invested in a little bit more. But recognizing that I might be alone in that thought process. Thank you.
You are not, and that's why we're seeing the funding that we're getting from the feds and the province. And one of the things with this study is how do we make it better? You know, you think about outlying areas, and if we look at Canning as an example, we're talking about you know, a significant amount of housing going out there. Well, how are those people going to get around? Is everyone going to need to have a car? So all these things are being looked at, but not just kind of in our neighborhood. It's our big neighborhood. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and this is a question for you. With how King's Transit and Valley Waste has been sort of restructured, and with the IMSA, and then having sort of like a board and a CEO at the top, would you say that it's improving with the new structure and sort of the council being sort of pulled back from that over the last couple of years? Okay.
Okay, how do I phrase this? It's moving slower than I thought it would.
Okay.
And, you know, and I say that only because, you know, every time you're sitting at the table, these are really big portfolios to catch up on. And, you know, and part of it was that we, as part of this IMSA restructuring, is that we hired entities to do the studies for us. And, you know, so I may be familiar with how a bus goes around in our area. They aren't. And so, you know, there's a lot of that, and it will be better, but we're not there yet. And I'm going to say, as Councillor Gerard brought up, there's not a meeting goes by where we're not looking at the cost of a bus ride and saying, you know, how do we get this into control? And, you know, I mean, something as simple as the difference between what Valley Waste pays for gasoline or diesel and King's Transit pays for diesel. And, you know, so you're looking at this sort of stuff. And as we electrify the buses, I mean, that will change, but are we driving a route, or are we moving stuff? And I think that's really something that we have to think about, because if our route is Highway 1, and, you know, we have a few little catchment areas. You think about Kentville, you know, the way it goes up, and we go down through Belcher and onto Port William Street. And so those sort of things are happening, but are we really catching all the people that need to use the bus? And so these are bigger than, I'm going to say, what the job is currently.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Councillor Huntley.
Thank you. In all your discussions with transit, has there ever been any discussion with the Joint Regional Transportation Agency, as in some sort of working plan together?
I'm going to say that they're actually late to the table.
Yeah.
So we were going and doing and mobilized long before they got together. So I believe that there is a link out of one of our companies into them. But yeah, they're still trying to figure out what they're doing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. What is, you mentioned that the feds gave $11 million to electrify the fleet.
Yes.
I remember, I think it was this last council, they had talked about it, and I think it was $750,000 for an electric bus. Do you have a current figure?
I don't.
And are the people that are making the decision on going electric, are they aware that the big companies, Ford, Toyota, and companies like that are scaling back on the production, and not only scaling back production, losing money, but also asking the government to extend their deadlines where they say they want X% of vehicles to be electric?
I'm not sure how they're moving forward with this. However, I do know that it will be part of the consideration. The other thing is just looking at bus sizes, because, on a daily basis, you see, the great big buses driving around with 2 people on them. However, when you move from, let's say, Acadia University back into Kentville, or from King's Tech outwards, you see a full bus. So this is all part of the study as well, and the electrification of our fleet. And I want to say that there's also been discussions with the hybrid models. So I'm not sure exactly how much it costs. Those numbers haven't been given to us. We just know how much money we have, and we're trying to figure out what we need to do from a fleet perspective and from a route perspective.
Just one last thing quickly, because I think the last time you and I spoke about this, I believe it was the county, but they wanted to start sending buses, Centerville and out like that. Is that off the table now?
I do not believe that's off the table. I think from the consultation, there was a lot of, why don't you come to where I live? Or the other thing as well is that perhaps we need a hub and spoke model, where you bring all these smaller buses in from our outlying areas, and they meet as a bus is, say, going to Greenwood or going to the Wolfville model. So that sort of thing is being looked at, because in a rural area that's as big as this, and when you have a population as widely dispersed as what we have, that's really the type of model you need. However, I'm also going to say that if you think of our route as Highway 1, I want to say that we have 266 bus stops on that highway. So, what's happened over the years is that a person gets on the bus every single day. So they've asked the bus driver to stop, and, the shoulder meets the requirements. So we also have some issues like that. And so all of this is on the table, and there are no sacred cows.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, if there's no further discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to approve the attached King's Transit fiscal 24-25 operational budget in the amount of $3,836,948, and further that council approve the 24-25 capital budget in the amount of $5,630,000, and further that council approve the municipal operating grant in the amount of $1,729,103. The town of Kentville's 20% share is $345,821. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much. The next one is with regards to the intermunicipal service agreement with Valley Waste, and this is the budgets for 24-25 with a recommendation from the IMSA Board of Directors to approve both the operating and the capital budgets and the municipal contribution. So the motion is that council approve the attached Valley Waste fiscal 24-25 operational budget in the amount of $6,859,565, and further that council approve the 24-25 capital budget in the amount of $1,545,000, and further that council approve the municipal contribution in the amount of $6,859,565. The town of Kentville's share is 10.33%. at $708,444. Someone could move that, please. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor Huntley for the second, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve Valley Waste 24-25 operational budget in the amount of $6,859,565, and further that council approve the 24-25 capital budget in the amount of $1,545,000, and further that council approve the municipal contribution in the amount of $6,859,565. The town of Kentville's 10.33% share is $708,444. Is there any discussion on this matter? Okay, well, I will point out a couple of matters for you on this. So you will note that the operational budget is the $6,859,565, and that our municipal contribution is based on that amount. However, there's also a capital budget in this of $1.5 million. That capital budget is being funded from the money that we are getting back from the operation of Chester. So what that means is that Chester is where our landfill matter goes, and if Chester gets more stuff in than they had budgeted on, the price per thousand goes down. So they got a lot of garbage this year, and so therefore the price went down, which meant that there was extra money. And typically what happens with that extra is that it's redistributed to the partners. However, this year it just made sense to leave it as part of the capital budget. So that's why those numbers look the way that they look. And you'll also note, if you were comparing this to the King's Transit, we give them what is called a municipal operating grant, because they are getting grants from both the feds and the province, to fund their operations. However, Valley Waste, the partners fund it 100%. So are there any questions? Any discussion? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to Valley Waste fiscal 24-25 operational budget in the amount of $6,859,565, and further that council approve the 24-25 capital budget in the amount of $1,545,000, and further that council approve the municipal contribution in the amount of $6,859,565, and the town of Kentville 10.33% share is $708,444. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much. All right, our next matter is with regards to the development officer appointment, and CAO, did you wish to speak to that?
I will. The town of Kentville currently is without a development officer. It leaves us shorthanded. We use C&D in an interim basis, C+D in an interim basis for planning services. This is a short-term gap. We have put out a request for proposals for planning and development services for a longer term, so we can right-size our in-house planning and development. It's the recommendation of administration that we appoint, and I'll do my best on pronunciation, Fuki Asaya and Raleigh King as acting development officers from C&D on an interim basis until such time as we scored and awarded the RFP for planning and development services.
Thank you very much, CAO. Based on that recommendation, we have a motion that council appoint Fuki Asai and Raleigh King from C&D Consulting as acting development officers for the town of Kentville, effective immediately. Deputy Mayor, thank you. And Councillor Zabian for the second, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council appoint Fuki Asai and Raleigh King from C&D Consulting as acting development officers for the town of Kentville effective immediately. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is that council appoint Fuki Asai and Raleigh King from C&D Consulting as acting development officers for the town of Kentville effective immediately. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much. CAO, we have one matter from Annapolis Valley Regional Libraries as our correspondence. Did you wish to speak to that?
I don't really have any comments other than what was in the letter, so.
All right, thank you. And from a funding perspective, this doesn't affect us as it is addressed to the province, or at least it doesn't affect us until it comes down, right?
It is directed to the province, and it would depend on how the province chose to deal with it. They could increase their funding proportion and have it not impact municipalities, or they could just increase the size of the envelope, which would have an impact on our budget.
Okay. Thank you very much. So that concludes our new business and our correspondence. We now have public comments. Citizens are invited to make comment to council on any matter currently before the council. Items not on the agenda. Please state your name and address. Your comments are limited to 3 minutes. Oh, excuse,
Yep.
okay, just turned it up, go.
Good. And welcome to the new CAO, Mr. Lawrence. My name is Dion Davidson. My wife, Marisa, and our daughter and I live on Park Street across from KCA School. I'm here to discuss flooding issues again, unfortunately. We submitted a letter to council on January 24th. Unfortunately, it didn't make it into the agenda, so that's what I will be outlining. At the September 25th council meeting, we brought forward our concerns regarding stormwater studies provided to us from professional stormwater engineers. These studies outline the multiple undocumented stormwater outlets which empty from subdivision developments upstream south of our property directly into our land. More than half of these 23 outlets were found to have not been properly constructed and to be contributing to the erosion, flooding, and sedimentation issues that have caused so much destruction to our home and property since 2015. We also provided council with the results of our Department of Environment FOIPOP requests, which confirm that no stormwater modeling or permits had ever been submitted or obtained for the Glenwood, Palmater, or McDougal Heights subdivisions, even though these are required by the province when constructing around waterways. We have yet to hear anything from the town as to what plans there are to rectify these issues on town-owned land, issues that continue to directly impact our property. At this same September meeting, Director Bell provided an inter-office memo outlining some of the causes of the recent stormwater events, much of which echoed the concerns of our independent engineer. Silt, rock erosion, and vegetation debris are being collected by runoff, washing down and blocking water systems downstream. The result, as has been demonstrated repeatedly, is continued damage to personal and public property and increasing human safety risk. Councillor York presented an RFD to council for the commissioning of a third-party engineer to study the underlying stormwater issues and make recommendations to rectify the problems with stormwater management throughout the town. Subsequent to the September 25th council meeting, Director Bell commissioned Design Point Engineering to do what has been called an independent study of these infrastructure issues. The reason given for choosing this company was that they had done prior work for the town and are familiar with the infrastructure. However, both Director Bell, who worked in private practice with Hiltz & Simone and Able Engineering prior to his employment with the town, and Glenn Woodford of Design Point Engineering, working formerly under Terrain Group, did most of the engineering and design work for the McDougal Heights subdivision, the construction of much of which, by the way, was undertaken by Bryson Developments. Since the flooding problems are so closely linked with the development of this area, we must share our concern that this appears to represent a serious professional conflict of interest. This concern aside, citizens were told that this report would be completed in December. A December 11th memo to CAC from Director Bell outlined that a preliminary letter report was provided by Design Point, who had been engaged to conduct a storm drainage review only for the Condon Avenue watershed. It was our understanding that the RFD was to include flooding throughout the entire town and not just Condon Avenue. In any case, we request this report, such as it is, to be made publicly available so that residents can review their determinations regarding the underlying causes of these destructive flooding events and what might be done to rectify them. It should also be noted that Design Point Engineering is the firm Bryson Developments has hired for 2 major proposed developments in the town of Kentville. The first proposal is for a high-density, mixed residential expansion south of Acadia Drive in McDougall Heights. You, as council, thoughtfully rejected this proposal in July, and Bryson Developments has appealed this decision to the review board. The second proposal was presented before you at a special meeting of council on January 22nd, comprising over 2,000 residential units adjacent to the Weavex Andritz plant off of Park Street. Again, this appears to represent a serious conflict of interest. An independent study of ongoing and recurring stormwater issues should not be undertaken by an engineering firm that has explicit and direct involvement with a private developer who has brought the decisions of council before the review board. It is also concerning that the January 22nd special council meeting was conducted without clear advertising on the town's website, Facebook page, or in any of the news publications. This is significant as the magnitude of these proposals and their rezoning would see the town grow by more than 60% by absorbing more than 4,000 new residents. Obviously, these are decisions that current residents, including those that are already sustaining property damage because of inadequate infrastructure, should be included in. It was at this special meeting that Bryson Developments sought interest from council to expedite the development of Kentville Crossing. At the same time, Bryson is currently marking out trees to clear-cut 43 acres atop McDougall Heights, the area that is still before the review board. It is incomprehensible to provide a special fast track for a developer to build in one area of town while they simultaneously clear-cut upstream of other areas that are currently suffering damages from flooding and erosion due to previously inadequately constructed developments with respect to waterway management. Is it not obvious that these current issues need to be properly assessed and repaired before any consideration should be given to developing these additional areas? For example, should we not await the establishment of a property planning department? In conclusion, we ask that council make efforts to prevent Bryson Developments from any further clear-cutting within the town, at least until such time as transparent and truly independent third-party stormwater engineering assessments have been made and their recommendations carried out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I agree with what he just said, that there's a conflict of
Ron,
interest.
Ron, could you please introduce yourself? Our
Oh, I'm
CAO
sorry.
doesn't know you.
My name is Ron Cousins,
Thank you.
and I have some land that the town wants to take from me. So I got a stake in this. But there is a conflict of interest. I understand what he was saying there. And you shouldn't be clear-cutting trees. And you definitely shouldn't be cutting next to a brook or a stream. And DFO will tell you, you're supposed to stay 100 feet away from streams when you're cutting. That's right in the DFO. They changed the name now, but you know what I mean, Department of Forestry. And that's their law. You don't cut within 100 feet of a stream, and especially clear cutting. And you could do some selective cutting, but I agree with everything he said, and I think he's right. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Welcome to Kentville. My name's Gary Randall, I live on School Street, and I've lived there for 23 years. Ron lives there all his life. I also agree with what this gentleman said. For God's sakes, don't go clear-cutting above his property when he's already flooding now. Like, it was a big issue here when the floods happened. I think, Gerard, you mentioned about possibly hiring some independent consultant to give some advice to help the engineering here, right, with all the problems that they have with the water. And I don't know, I don't think anybody here went to the URB hearings, which kind of blew me away. I attended every one. I did see the deputy mayor there for a bit one morning. And the only one I really seen from the town of Kentville there that I can remember was one staff person. A young lady was there for a few minutes and left. And then our engineer appeared, right, as a witness, I guess, defending the town's position and not allowing the rezoning. But it did catch my eye when Mr. Bryson had an expert there, an engineer from Design Point. And he was appearing on behalf of Mr. Bryson, why he shouldn't be able to do why he shouldn't be allowed to get the rezoning to do the development. And come to find out, Design Point, I think, I just heard here, is the same company that our engineer hired to help him figure out what to do with the flooding that's being caused now and further flooding that could be caused if that development goes, the original proposal from Bryson above the McDougall Heights subdivision. So it's the same guy. He's working for Mr. Bryson, but the town's paying him to do the same type of consulting. I don't know if that's a conflict, but it sure as heck seems like they're getting pretty close together there. He's appearing for Mr. Bryson, and he's also hired by the town to tell the town why we have a flooding issue. And I'm not sure if it went away, but I do know I live on School Street, and if I were to buy Mr. Cousins' property and clear cut all of his woods, I would be flooded out, right? And this white stuff doesn't do it. It's in the spring, it's gonna happen. And I come to every meeting, and I keep waiting for somebody to say, what are we gonna do to fix that flooding problem before it floods you out again, and him out again, and her out again, and him out again? Like, we just can't wait. You know, something should be done. We know already, these people got flooded. It's fact. You've got the pictures. If you went to the URB, you'd see crazy pictures of, you know, it just looks like a river running down through that big subdivision, and now somebody wants to cut all the woods above it. Like, that's not good for the town. It's not good for people that want to come here. It's not good for doctors that we want to have. Like, who the heck wants to come when we can't stop the flooding? And we're not even doing anything about it other than consulting from the same person that wants to create more flooding. Anyway, I hope you can understand. I know I'm a bit mixed up, but you get some worked up about this stuff when you see your neighbors getting flooded out, and we're all sitting around the table waiting for something to happen. And it's going to happen this spring. It has to. You see that white stuff, it's all going to melt. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name's Brent O'Connor. I live at 18 Orchard Road here in Kentville. And I want to link the two previous speakers back to the discussion that we've had earlier regarding G70 and G64 and communication with council. Spent a lot of time in the last little bit in direct communication with members of council, and I'm not going to bring up the issues that are involved in that. My concern with, I heard some remarks here tonight that concerned me, and that was that the concept that the mayor and council email address would be one that only the mayor would respond to. And I know that's just a working concept, that's not actual policy as of yet. I will say that that particular email address, when it came to my particular situation and my desire to assist councilors in understanding a complicated issue that the town does not currently have staff available to deal with, despite the protests of some members of council in public to me, that they rely on staff for their information and not people like me, that if we don't have access to the ability to clearly communicate with mayor and council while also communicating to members of staff and be able to get answers back so that those people can ask questions, because not everyone is going to be as well put together and able to formulate a concise question in a way that fits neatly into policy and procedures, And as our elected representatives, we need the ability to communicate with you. We need the ability to communicate with you collectively outside of these meetings, and for you to communicate back in a way that asks a question, and so that your peers here at this council can also hear those answers. And if we don't have that, and if we make a mistake as we put together policies around communication at council meetings, and we take away a valuable resource for communicating civic issues and solutions, we could really create some problems, particularly in a time when council has already admitted, they've done so tonight, you have nominated 2 private employees of a private firm to function as development officers for the town. Because we can't attract, we haven't been able to hire the correct talent, which would be in an office in this building to answer questions to the people who sit around this table and to be able to serve people in the general public. So as you consider how you're going to discuss and formulate the issues around communication with council for these meetings, please do not throw out a baby and bathwater out the window at the same time and remove an easy, simple method for citizens of the community to communicate to council via that council and mayor email address, so that we can have ongoing discussions wherein those issues can be worked out internally. Because when you don't have the ability to work out those issues internally, then you have large groups of disgruntled people who take to whatever platform is available to them so that they can stomp, rave, change their minds, change the focus of those groups, and start to steer the political landscape in a way that happens because they're mad. And why they're mad is because they don't feel like they're being listened to. Please do not throw gasoline on a fire that is burning where there are citizens in this town who don't feel listened to because it's hard. Please don't take communications that are used in that email and throw them back at citizens who are engaging in good faith discussions with members of council on issues in civil ways and challenge them to imply that if they are not going to run for council, then maybe their perspectives aren't important. That seems to be an ethical piece of conduct that was very unfortunate for me to have to experience. And it happens because we don't have clear lines of communication. So as you look at G26, or sorry, I'm gonna get it right, because it's G70 and,
64.
thank you, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater or the storm water. Okay, these people have real problems. They need to be able to communicate with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Mark Rogers, Kentville. I'm only smiling because I think most of you know that I'm Mark Rogers. Welcome. It's a beautiful town. It's a beautiful valley, and we very much look forward to your input going forward. I'm not going to speak to stormwater issues, although I had a conversation with a citizen from town who was born in Kentville, who lives on Condon Avenue, who is seriously contemplating leaving Kentville because, in her words, it's not the town she grew up in. So when you take the stormwater matter back and discuss it, I know this person very, very well. This person would not use those words lightly. It makes me very sad. I'm here to talk about the Robinson property matter. I'm confused by a couple different things. First off, like other people in this room, I submitted a letter to Mayor and Council and CAO at the time, interim CAO, excuse me, I'm sorry. And I was told by a councillor who responded that it was being moved to the deputy clerk for to be included in the package, but it's not in the package. Same happened with other letters that came to council to this meeting. So The reason I'm confused by this because we have policy 70 and policy 64. Town does. So the reasons our letters aren't included is because you have to approve the policy first. The policy that is already the policy that you haven't been following even though you knew it was the policy, and you haven't included any of the recent letters you've received because you haven't yet approved the policy that's already a policy. Is that right? Because you got the policies. So, since my letter wasn't included, I will read it into the record. My concern here is, as I stand here, I've never received any comments or feedback other than a few anecdotal comments on any of the times I presented to council. So I would like to know, my ask is, when is my letter going to be received and acknowledged by the town? Hello, council, mayor, and CAO, and a special welcome to our new CAO. I'm writing today to discuss an issue that has divided my town council and to a certain degree our town, that being the purchase agreement on what is commonly known as the Robinson property. Now, we all realize this matter is before the courts, but I'm forced to ask why. We also know that the judge has deferred ruling until 2025. This is a backlog issue that we have no control over. We also know that either party can initiate and end this legal process to resolve this issue with a simple call or letter to their lawyers. It appears to be somewhat common knowledge that the developer has twice tried to bring this to an end, but the attempts were apparently not even met with a response from my town. We also know all too well that the only true winners, if there must be a winner, and there will be because it's before the courts, that the only true winners are the lawyers on both sides. So what is the net gain here? Is it for the town to win at whatever cost? I surely hope not. Or is it to better my town? When we analyze what we know about the situation, the similarities to Ryan's Park are obvious, but the manner in which they've been dealt with is vastly different. Common knowledge is that the Robinson developer fell out of favor with the mayor and some of council when the buried report of bullying towards staff was brought to light. If this is indeed the case, and it will never be proven, for there's no mechanism to prove it, but perception is key here. October 2024 is coming up. Perception is key. Then council is complicit in a petty and vindictive campaign to claim this land back under the guise of losing faith in the developer.
I'll ask you to keep your comments to the matter and not put criticism on council or staff members.
This is a letter respectfully that I submitted, and it hasn't been acknowledged, so I would like to continue reading if I might, please. Thank you. Did the mayor not respond to a councillor when asked about bringing this matter forward to initiate the buyback? And I quote, "Not yet, let's keep our powder dry." Further to this, my council is wasting my money, causing another councillor a great deal of stress and financial grief over something that should have never happened. How does any of this make sense? To engage in a legal battle and spend large sums of taxpayer money, of my money, to win back a parcel of land when the developer has plans and finances in place to simply relist it, to sell it, and develop it again? My ask of all of council is to put a motion on the floor to have legal counsels for both sides talk to resolve this issue. Yes, it may cost more money initially, but better to resolve it, build a building, fill an empty lot, and generate tax dollars than to fight this in the courts. Please do the correct thing here. What is best for this town, which I need to hope is in every councillor's priority? A dynamic downtown with an increased tax base, more residential units and a new building, or an empty lot and legal fees with a divisive town council. $35,000 per year is the estimated loss in tax revenues as this lot sits empty compared to what was planned. This does not take into account spin-offs, more people in town, and more businesses. $65,000 appears to be the town's legal fees to date as of 2021 and climbing. As an aside, the developer's legal fees are now more than they paid for the property. Make no mistake, many in my town perceive this to be an issue brought about by a vindictive agenda. If not resolved, it will be an election issue. Thank you.
Thank you. The council has two items concerning land and legal, which must be conducted in a closed session. We require a motion to go into the closed session to discuss the agenda items. We will not be returning to Facebook Live for completion of the meeting or adjournment. So the motion is to move into the closed session to discuss the agenda items. Who moved that, sorry? Thank you, Councillor York. Councillor Zabian for the second, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council move into a closed session. The question is on adoption of the motion to move into a closed session. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried, and the time is 8:13. We'll take a 5-minute biological break.